What if the reason your life feels stuck is not because you are not trying hard enough, but because you are trying too hard? Think about it. The harder you try to hold on to someone, the more distant they become. The more you try to control your life, the more everything slips through your hands. You plan, you push, you fix, you chase, and somehow nothing feels right. It is confusing, isn't it? Because you have done everything you were told to do. You stayed disciplined. You stayed focused. You did not give up. And yet, deep down, something feels wrong, like you are moving, but not really going anywhere. Carl Jung believed that when you try to force life into your own plans, you may actually be moving further away from the path meant for you, because beneath your conscious effort, there is a deeper intelligence at work, a quieter voice, a subtle direction, something that does not respond to pressure, only to awareness. And the more you try to control life with force, the less you can hear it. So what if the problem is not that life is not working, but that you are working against it? In this video, we are going to explore a different way of living, one where you stop forcing and allow God to guide your life, because by the end of this, you may realize something unexpected. Letting go is not weakness. It might be the most powerful decision you will ever make. Number 1, the illusion of control. Most people live with a quiet belief they rarely question. When something feels uncertain, you must act. When something feels broken, you must fix it. When something feels uncomfortable, you must do something, anything to make it go away. So you move, you make the plan, you fill your time, your mind, your life with constant activity because deep down it feels safer that way. As long as you are doing something, you feel in control, and as long as you feel in control, you feel okay. But here is the illusion. Action is not the same as alignment. Just because you are moving does not mean you are moving in the right direction. Carl Jung saw this pattern very clearly. He once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul." Think about that for a moment. Anything, even exhausting themselves, even chasing things they do not truly want, even building a life that looks right on the outside but feels empty on the inside. I once knew someone like this. Let's call her Sophia. Sophia was always busy. If something in her life felt uncertain, she immediately made a plan. If she felt restless, she signed up for a new course. If things slowed down, she filled her calendar again. From the outside, she looked driven, focused, successful. But one night, in a quiet conversation, she admitted something she had never said out loud. She was afraid of stillness. Because in those rare moments when nothing was happening, when there was nothing to fix, nothing to chase, nothing to distract her, she started to feel something she could not explain. A quiet discomfort, a strange emptiness, a question she did not want to face. So she stayed busy, not because her life required it, but because silence did. And that is when it becomes clear. You are not busy because your life needs it. You are busy because your soul is trying to speak, and you do not want to hear it. Because when everything becomes quiet, you can no longer escape yourself, and the ego hates that. The ego wants noise. It wants movement. It wants control because control creates the illusion of safety. But life does not follow the logic of the ego. There are moments when doing more only takes you further away. Moments when trying harder only creates more confusion. Imagine your inner world like a lake. If the surface is constantly disturbed, you cannot see what lies beneath. The more you stir it, the more unclear it becomes. But when the water becomes still, something unexpected happens. Clarity begins to appear. Direction reveals itself, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped interfering with it. And this is the part most people miss. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is nothing. Not out of laziness, not out of fear, but out of a willingness to listen. Because when you stop using action as a shield, you begin to notice something deeper guiding your life. But most people never reach that point because they never stop long enough to hear it, and this is where things begin to quietly fall apart. Number 2. When life stops flowing, there comes a moment in life that many people do not understand. A moment when everything simply stops flowing. The things that once felt natural begin to feel heavy. The effort you put in no longer creates the same results. You try to move forward, but it feels like something invisible is holding you back. It is like rowing a boat in a river that has quietly dried up. You keep rowing, you keep trying, but no matter how hard you push, nothing moves. And in that moment, the ego reacts immediately. Try harder, push more. Do not stop now. Because to the ego, lack of progress means failure, and failure means danger. But Jung saw something very different in these moments. He understood that human energy is not random, it is deeply connected to alignment. When you are moving in the right direction, the direction that truly belongs to you, energy flows naturally. You feel engaged, curious, alive even in difficulty. But when you begin moving away from that path, something subtle happens first. Not external failure, but internal resistance, a quiet loss of energy. And this is where most people misunderstand themselves. They think, I am tired, I am lazy, I have lost discipline. But the truth is often much deeper than that. Low energy does not always mean weakness. Sometimes it means misalignment. It means that something within you no longer agrees with where you are going. I once spoke with someone who had spent years building a career they once loved. At the beginning, everything felt right. They were motivated, focused, driven. But over time, something changed. The same work began to feel heavier, the same routine became exhausting. Even small tasks required more and more effort. So they did what most people do. They pushed harder, they worked longer hours, set stricter goals, tried to fix themselves, but nothing changed until one day they admitted something they had been avoiding for a long time. It is not that I cannot do this anymore. I just do not feel like I belong here. And that realization changed everything. Because the problem was never their discipline. The problem was that their path had changed, but they had not allowed themselves to see it. This is the deeper truth Jung pointed to. When your soul no longer agrees with your direction, it does not argue. It does not fight. It simply withdraws its energy quietly, gradually, without explanation. And if you are not paying attention, you will interpret that silence as failure. So you push harder, you force more. You try to squeeze life out of a direction that is already empty. But life does not respond to force in the way we think. Just like water, clarity does not come from stirring harder. It comes from stillness. When the surface becomes calm, you begin to see what was always there beneath it. But most people never allow that stillness because stopping feels like losing. Pausing feels like falling behind, so they keep rowing in a river that no longer carries them. And the question is, what happens when you ignore that signal? Number 3, the warning signs you ignore. There is something important most people never realize about their inner life. Life does not suddenly collapse overnight. Before everything breaks, before the burnout, before the crisis, there were signals. The unconscious is not silent, it is always communicating. The problem is that it does not speak in loud, dramatic ways at first. It whispers, and those whispers usually begin in very ordinary forms. A slight fatigue you cannot explain, a growing disinterest in things you once cared about, a feeling that something is off even when everything looks fine. This is stage 1, and most people ignore it because it is easy to explain away. I am just tired, I just need a break, it is just a phase. So they keep going, but when the signal is ignored, it does not disappear, it gets louder. Stage 2 begins. Now the body starts to react. Stress becomes constant, sleep becomes difficult. Your mind does not slow down even when you try to rest. There is a tension inside you that you cannot quite name, but you feel it everywhere. Still, most people do not stop here either. They push through, they normalize it. They tell themselves this is what life is supposed to feel like until eventually the signal can no longer be ignored. Stage 3, burnout, collapse. The moment when everything stops, not because you chose to stop, but because you cannot continue. Carl Jung once said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And this is what he meant. If you refuse to face the quiet discomfort, it will return as something you cannot avoid. I remember reading a story about someone who had worked at the same job for 8 years. For the last 2 years, every morning felt heavy, getting out of bed became harder. The motivation they once had slowly disappeared. But instead of listening, they pushed harder, worked longer hours, set bigger goals, tried to discipline themselves out of it until their body finally forced a decision. They could not sleep. They had constant headaches, and eventually they had to quit, not because they failed, but because they had ignored the signal for too long. And when they looked back, they said something that stayed with me. I knew long before. I just did not want to admit it. This is how the unconscious works. It does not try to destroy you, it tries to correct you. But if you do not listen, when it whispers, it will eventually make sure you hear it. Your breakdown was not the problem, it was the message you ignored for too long. So, if you have ever felt this, that slow loss of energy, that quiet resistance inside, that moment where everything just became too much, you are not alone. And more importantly, you are not broken, you were being guided. If this resonates with you, just write in the comments, I felt it. Because sometimes the first step to clarity is simply admitting that you have been feeling it all along. Tichi necessary collapse number 4, the necessary collapse. There are moments in life that feel like everything is falling apart. A job ends unexpectedly. A relationship you thought would last ends. A plan you carefully built suddenly falls apart, and in those moments it does not feel like guidance, it feels like loss. It feels like chaos, like something has gone wrong. But Carl Jung believed that true transformation, the process he called individuation, cannot happen without the breaking of illusions. The life you thought was right, the identity you built, the path you were certain about, sometimes they are not aligned with who you truly are, and when that happens, life does not always gently redirect you. Sometimes it removes what no longer belongs in your life, not to destroy you, but to free you. We like to believe growth is a smooth process, that life should move in a straight, logical line. But real growth rarely looks like that. It looks more like fire, like the story of the phoenix. Before it rises again, it must first burn completely, not partially, not comfortably. The old version must turn to ashes so something new can emerge. Or imagine a house with a cracked foundation. You can repaint the walls, you can decorate it, you can pretend everything is fine. But eventually it will collapse because what is underneath is no longer stable. And sometimes the only way to build something stronger is to tear down what was never meant to last. Even a seed understands this. Before it can grow into something alive, it must break open in the dark. From the outside, it looks like destruction, but in reality, it is transformation, and your life follows the same principle. That job you lost, that relationship, that ended, the plan that failed, what if it was not taken from you? What if you were being removed from something that no longer aligned with who you are becoming? Because here is a truth most people resist. Sometimes God does not guide you by opening doors, but by closing the ones you refuse to leave. Not because you made a mistake, but because you stayed somewhere longer than you were meant to. And when you do not walk away, life will eventually push you out. It does not feel gentle. It does not feel fair. But it is often precise. Because if those structures had stayed in place, you might have continued building your life on something that could not truly support you. So what feels like loss is often redirection. What feels like destruction is often rebuilding, not into who you thought you should be, but into who you truly are. And if you look back on your life, you may already see this pattern. The things that broke you were often the things that changed you. The endings you resisted were the beginnings you did not expect. So maybe nothing was falling apart. Maybe everything was being rearranged. And after everything falls apart, something very strange begins to happen. Swayanshri number 5, synchronicity. after something in your life collapses, or after you are forced to let go of what you once held tightly, there is often a quiet phase that follows. Not dramatic, not obvious, but strangely meaningful. It is the phrase where life begins to speak again. Not through clear answers, not through loud signs, but through something much more subtle, circumstances. You meet someone at exactly the right moment. You hear a sentence that feels like it was meant just for you. An opportunity appears right when you thought everything was over. And you pause for a second because it does not feel random, it feels connected. Carl Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, events that have no clear cause, yet carry a deep sense of meaning for the person experiencing them. From the outside, they look ordinary, but from the inside, they feel like guidance. Jung believed that when your inner world begins to shift, your outer world starts to reflect that change, not in obvious ways, but in patterns, in timing, in small alignments that seem too precise to ignore. Because life does not shout direction, it whispers through patterns. The problem is most people are too busy forcing their path to notice what is quietly being shown to them. They are looking for certainty, a full plan, a clear map, a guaranteed outcome. But life rarely works that way. It is more like walking through fog. You cannot see the entire road ahead. You do not know every turn. You do not have complete clarity, but you can see the next step. And that is always enough, because each step reveals the next, and the next reveals another. Looking back, many people realize something surprising. The most important moments in their lives were not planned. They were encountered. A random conversation that changed everything, a chance meeting that opened a new direction, a moment of clarity that arrived without warning. At the time, it felt small, but later it became everything. And this is where your relationship with control begins to change. You stop trying to force the entire path into existence, and instead you begin to notice, to pay attention, to trust the small signals, because you start to understand something deeper. You do not need the whole path, you only need the next step. And when you begin to live this way, something shifts inside you. You are no longer chasing life. You are walking with it, more aware, more open, more aligned with something you cannot fully explain but can clearly feel. And that is when life starts to feel less like a struggle and more like a quiet conversation. PNRIEA's TCGL number 6, inner peace is the signal. After everything we have explored, the signals, the resistance, the collapse, the unexpected guidance, there's one final sign. And it is not what most people expect. It is not recognition. It is not everything suddenly working out. The clearest sign that you are on the right path is something much quieter, inner peace. Not excitement, not constant happiness, but a deep, steady sense of calm, a feeling that even if things are uncertain, something inside you is no longer fighting. When you are moving in the right direction, your mind begins to settle. You feel clearer, more grounded, more present. You are not rushing. You are not forcing. You are not trying to prove anything. But when you are on the wrong path, everything feels tense. You overthink every decision. You feel anxious even when nothing is wrong. You keep pushing, but something inside resists. It is like wearing the wrong pair of shoes. You can still walk. You can still move forward, but every step feels slightly off, uncomfortable, forced. And the longer you keep going, the more exhausting it becomes. But when the shoes are right, you do not even think about them. You just walk. Your life feels the same way. The right path does not always feel easy, but it feels right in a way you cannot fully explain, and that feeling is often the clearest sign of all. Not that everything is perfect, but that you are finally moving in alignment with who you truly are. Konshu-san, and maybe after everything you have heard in this video, you are starting to see your life a little differently. Maybe what felt like confusion was never confusion at all. Maybe what felt like failure was not failure. Maybe it was direction. Because the truth is, you do not need to force everything. You do not need to control every outcome. You do not need to figure everything out right now. What you need is something much simpler and much harder: to pause, to listen, to trust. Because you are not lost. You are being redirected. You are not falling behind. You are being slowed down so you can finally see. And your life is not out of control. It is being guided in ways your ego cannot understand. There is a deeper rhythm moving beneath everything. A quiet intelligence that does not rush, does not force, does not panic. And when you stop resisting it, you begin to feel it, not as answers, but as clarity, not as certainty, but as peace. So maybe the next time life does not go your way, instead of forcing it back into place, you pause, you breathe, and you ask yourself, what is this trying to show me? Because sometimes the path you have been chasing was never yours, and the one meant for you has been waiting for you to stop forcing and start trusting. So do not force everything. Let God guide you. And if something in this video spoke to you, stay with this channel, because you are not alone in this journey. And maybe you have been closer to your path than you ever realized.